We're living through the most disruptive period in the modern work history. The ground is shifting so fast that most people are drowning trying to keep up. They've been told that one more AI tool or one more software package will save them. It won't. If you're just a user of AI tools, you're replaceable. If you're still just processing data, you're going to be left behind. AI doesn't want your job. It wants the easy parts of your job that you've been doing on autopilot. The real advantage over the next 10 years isn't your tech stack. It's your human operating system, the quality of questions you ask and the presence that you bring. My guest today has led digital strategy at Airbnb and Sage, and now is the director of AI for the International Coaching Federation. She's literally writing the rules for how humans and machines work together. She's here to give you the cheat code for staying relevant when everything at work is shifting beneath you, including why 90% of AI projects fail and how to be part of the 10% that don't. Please welcome Susan Caesar.
Hello, Jeff. Thank you for inviting me to the show. This is great.
Good to finally meet you. Susan, where did you grow up and what was life like for you back then?
You may be able to tell from my accent. I'm originally from England, so a place called Bristol. That's where I grew up and spent most of my formative years. And growing up as a child, nature was really important to me. We lived in an area where we had access to all the fields and the cows and the rabbits and all those kind of things, which I loved. I love animals. My first job I thought was going to be a vet. That was what I wanted to be, a veterinary surgeon when I was growing up. I was very creative. Curiosity is a big theme for me. It started when I was very young, dismantling cameras or watches and jewelry and repairing them, those kind of things I was curious about. And I was very adventurous and I guess a bit of a non-conformist. I like to think outside of the box. And I think some of those things are still true of me today, probably all of them, actually.
So what I'm hearing there is you thought you were going to be maybe a farmer or work on a farm or a veterinarian?
A veterinarian. I thought I would actually do vets as from wild animals, so going out to safari and things like that and looking after elephants and giraffes. And it's still part of what I'm interested in with my own humane org, that I advocate for the planet. I think that's where my roots of nature and doing the right thing by wildlife comes from. I was part of the World Wildlife Foundation when I was in my as a child. Yeah.
That's a good route. My daughter is all about animals. So every night we end up reading books about the Arctic or the Savannah or the Sahara and all the animals that come from them. I didn't consider that World Wildlife Federation. We just spend a ton of time at the zoo. So
It's great. It's great to encourage that, because the more that we care about animals, the more we care about the planet, the more that we are looking after our home.
yeah, absolutely. Really looking forward to getting into it with you a little bit more. You spent years at the top of the tech world, including Airbnb. What was the one moment that you realized that better technology alone wasn't the answer and that people really had to come first?
I started off as a creative, so I was a graphic designer and an art director in direct marketing. And so that was really trying to understand how to engage audiences, how to attract them. So you needed to understand the needs and expectations of people. But I was then curious beyond that in terms of how do we, once we've attracted these customers, what do we do with that? So I moved into the operational space, contact centers and operational management. And when I was in that space, I could see that the way that we had designed the operating model, the technology that we had within that, it was creating pain points and frictions. So we weren't meeting the needs and expectations of those users. And that really made me, I was already human focused, but that's really where my body of work started. I started to think, how do I make organizations more human? How do I take apart all of these pain points in these frictions and make it more to meet the expectations of people, whether that's customers or employees? And so that's where I start from, really, is what's happening for the people.
You mentioned contact center. So it was like customer service side. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yes, I've done that. Sales, marketing, and contact centers. Yeah. Customer services.
Got it. So maybe you can just elaborate a little bit about that, about your experience. What kinds of things, what kinds of data were you reviewing? What things were relevant that you discovered within that sector of business as you moved into it?
I think when you look at an organization, it's easy for you to create a dashboard of signals. So if you think about the end-to-end customer journey or employee journey, and if you break those down into the key stages of that life cycle, and then find ways to surface data, signals across that journey, and then what you're able to do is then start to think about how do you code those. So some of the pain points and barriers that I mentioned, you could color code those red. And so then if you're looking across the whole organization at this dashboard, you'd be able to see where your experiences are delighting your customers or your employees, or they're actually creating problems for them. And where you see the problems, you then dig into what's the root cause of that. And then you look for different ways to reimagine that process or that workflow so that it turns green.
How are organizations capturing that type of data that they're classifying as red, green, yellow, et cetera?
Well, I think it depends on the size of the organization. The organizations I've worked in have been large, and so you have many different sources of data, and that can be quite confusing. It's very hard to get a single source of truth, but there are tools out there that enable you to aggregate the data. So whether you're using Snowflake or Power BI, or whether it's something like Adobe's Experience Clouds, all of these technologies pull in the different data sources that you have across your organization in order for you to have an experience dashboard. I think of it a bit like the Pixar movie Inside Out. They have an emotions dashboard in that film. And so it's kind of like, how might you recreate that in a business context?
So you are on the side that you're analyzing the results of that reporting and then trying to improve the experience for the user, or improve customer satisfaction, or trying to improve efficiencies internally. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah, exactly. You're really looking for how do you ensure that your operation is healthy, so it's running effectively, efficiently, no blockages, those types. It's very hard to do. It's easy to say, but and then for your customers or your employees, you're really looking for ease of use, so frictionless, high satisfaction levels, and then amplifying the moments of truth, the things that where you get it right, and that really amplifies the brand as a result of doing that well when it matters most to your customers or your employees. A good example of that would be Airbnb. When you're on trip, that part of the journey or that part of the life cycle is the most important. So as you're about to walk into the Airbnb property that you're renting, you want that part of the trip to go. So any barriers or friction at that point is really going to erode brand trust. And so you really want to focus on those things.
The human part is knowing what to do with that data. We're collecting so much data, but what is the story? What's the true story behind it? And obviously there's a way to consider it and analyze it and digest it and put it into different columns and rows. But what does that data mean? Hopefully AI can help us tackle that better.
I think AI will help significantly in the spaces I've just described. But I also think that the thing to help people, if they're liking the sound of this and they think it's something that they would like to try within their organization, finding all those data points, but then mapping that to the emotional impact it's having on the people. And if you can do that, then you start to prioritize where it matters most. And as I described with the Airbnb scenario, that on trip was when people were likely to be highly charged emotionally. They're frustrated, or they couldn't get into the property, or whatever those things are. And it creates negativity for the end user. So it's how do you remove those barriers and make it better?
You say most AI strategies are backwards and companies spend too much money on software, but not enough money on people. Why does mindset matter more than the technology itself?
Yeah, again, organizations exist to serve people, their communities or their customers, however they want to think about the people that they serve. But organizations are there for them. So that's where I start with the people. You don't really want to start with the technology. Technology is an answer to a problem. It's not the reason for doing something. So if you start with your people, you're then starting to say, okay, what problem do we want to solve? And how is it affecting the people that we serve? And that will help us start to think about how we solve it. So there is a practice called human-centered design, which I advocate for, whether that's with or without AI. I think starting from where the people are, thinking about that problem space and how best to solve it, what different options and alternatives could you come up with to solve that problem? And then which best serves the people that are affected or impacted by that? And who might you've not thought about in the design? Who are you leaving out? And what are the consequences of that? And so really, there's a phrase I used to use years ago: strategy and technology deliver promises, and then people and processes deliver results. So I am an advocate for starting there. And I think if you do that, if you're really focused on what are the business problems that you're solving, how does it affect the people that are affected by it, then you'll end up creating value. And then when you are applying technology to that space, whether it's AI or otherwise, you're creating value as a result of that for the company and for your end users, whether that's customers or employees.
And you're not only referring to the employee human component, but you're also referring to the customer, what we're talking about here. So maybe tell us a little bit more about that lens, but as it relates to the employee. How do you think having employees that are more focused on the people, why does that matter?
It matters because you're creating, people do business with humans, with people, not with businesses. And so your employees are your reputation, they are your organization. And Tom Peters talks about soft is hard. So people are the culture within your organization. And so therefore, if you empower, support, trust your people, they're going to create good experiences for your customers, and that's a good outcome for your business. So happy customers, so happy employees, sorry, equals happy customers equals a healthy business. So it is important to start from where the people are. And I think if I think about technology, I try to be agnostic of technology. Technology is a thing that we create solutions from. It could be one tool or it could be an integration of several things, but it's all there to create the fabric underneath the experience that you want to create for people. And the larger the organization, the more complex that integration of solutions becomes. But what you're looking for is, in that moment, what experience are you delivering for that customer or for that employee, and how well does it serve them in that moment? It sounds it's very hard to do. I've spent my whole career doing that. Yeah.
Absolutely. How well do you think enterprise organizations do at training their people and putting that investment in their people versus just putting heavy investments in the technology?
I think organizations understand the investment that they need to put into technology and probably overinvest in that and don't invest enough in the implications that it has on people. So in large programs that I've done, a lot of emphasis is spent in gathering requirements, thinking about how we design and develop the technology, how we then plan the rollout of that technology, how do we test it, how do we do user acceptance testing, all of that. But very little is planned for or designed for in terms of how it changes the way that people work, how they might need to be retrained as a consequence of what's happening, or actually how we might involve them in the process of capturing the requirements. It sounds like something that should happen all the time, but very rarely do we get the end users that are impacted by the change actively involved in developing the solutions. And I think that is changing. It will need to change much quicker now with AI, because AI is also going to be able to iterate the processes on the fly. So a lot of talk around intelligence at the edge now. So it means the people that are closer to the customer are probably able to iterate around the process or their workflow without having to go back to a central anything, really. And so it is important that we train and empower our people and that we provide the right kind of guardrails and guidance to them about how to adapt, adopt, use AI in a way that is aligned with the organizational purpose, but also doing it in a way that serves and creates value for the employees and the customers.
Having the experience of both managing teams that were being trained, selling training solutions, going through internal trainings in our new tools that we were rolling out in our teams and implementations of those and learning how to use those tools. I've had a lot of exposure throughout my career to these experiences. I would agree that their companies are not spending enough time on training people how to use those tools. It seems wild that they could spend 15, 20, 300, 500 million dollars on a piece of software, but they're usually not getting the most out of it. I think there's still a pretty significant gap with even just how people use LLM tools such as ChatGPT, Gemini. So it's always been tough to get companies to want to invest in the people. Part of this journey that I'm on is I really want to tell people you need to start learning some of this stuff on your own. The organization is going to be rolling out some of these tools, and they may not give you the greatest training on them, but the way you leverage those tools is really what's going to position you for the future of work. What do you say to organizations in the business that you're in right now to encourage them that training is extremely valuable?
I think, especially with AI, so I think it's really important that we have AI fluency or AI literacy everywhere. Like it's not going to be, it's difficult for anybody to imagine that you are going to be not using AI somehow. It will be woven into the fabric of life and work. And whether you love that idea or you hate that idea, creating some awareness about that so you have choice and you have agency in terms of how you use that. And increasingly, I think AI will take tasks away from people, not whole jobs. I think jobs will be redesigned as a consequence of AI, and therefore what we as humans will be elevated as a result of that. So the stuff that we do as humans will go up into the higher levels of decision making, critical thinking, those types of things. And so we need to be prepared for that because it is going to change what we do within the workplace and how we do it. I think leadership is pretty slow at leading the way. So really you would want leaders within organizations to already have the guidance in their operations around how to leverage AI in a way that's safe and compatible with the mission of the organizations. And very few are giving guidance like that at the moment. And so we hear about staff bringing their own devices, using their own AI tools to help them, not necessarily disclosing that, but it's a bit like when social media first came out and everybody was using their mobile phones using with social media within the workplace. We have a similar path or feel now. But with AI, I think it's going to transform work. At the moment, our organizations are still very hierarchical, and the factory mentality that we had back at the beginning of the industrial age is pretty much how our organizations still work. And that's not compatible with AI. AI is about decentralized, is about empowerment, is about partnership with AI. And that, I think, challenges the operating model, the kind of centralized tech stack, the centralized C-suite, all of that, I think, is due for some reimagining or disruption.
Valid point.
Especially, we're going to have agentic AI as part of our workforce. It is already happening. I was at a panel conversation last week where the futurist Vala from Salesforce talked about how much of the work that is within the whole Salesforce ecosystem is being done by agentic AI.
We're getting there rapidly. I view employees in a similar way myself, where I start thinking, is there an agent that can perform this function, or do I need a person to perform this function? And then I'm balancing the positives and the negatives. And it doesn't always just come down to cost. Sometimes there's proficiency that comes into play. And so I weigh those factors out myself. I know organizations are definitely considering that as well. How can the audience use AI reliably instead of just crossing their fingers and hoping for the best?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there is a difference between sequestered or ring-fenced AI and generic open models. And sometimes people don't understand the difference between those two things. Obviously, the sequestered ring fence is domain specific, or it's behind your firewalls. And so using it within your organization. So for instance, if your organization has Copilot, it's likely to be a sequestered instance of it so that things that you're doing in that space is protected. The client protections are allowing you to keep the privacy and confidentiality of what you're doing within those chat windows. But if you're using an open one, then there is a risk that it could leak out into the general LLM's knowledge, if you like. And I also think AI means different things to different people. You could be using prompts in AI a bit like using a search engine. You're putting an input and you're expecting an output. That's AI. Others might be creating projects or agents where the agentic AI, it's not agentic AI, it's a tailored use of the context window, but it's not agentic. It's not going off and figuring things out for itself. There's automations, and then there's the agentic AI. And then, of course, you probably have, like we do in the coaching space, there are bespoke tools and platforms that have been built specifically for coaching. Now, all of those descriptions, and there probably isn't an exhaustive list there, but that's all AI. And so people knowing where am I on that spectrum? What is it I'm using? And what's my level of fluency in that space? And when am I ready to go up to the next level of that? So that's why I think AI, it's something that we need to really think through and be very considerate about. How do we invite AI into our work or into our practice? Where does it fit? And what's AI really good at? And we should be thinking about it in that space. But what is AI not good at? And where should we never think about it? So there'll be high touch, high value things that you wouldn't want to put an AI tool into that space. You want to keep it human.
You really have to consider the use case, what it is specifically you want this tool to perform or this employee to do. You also have to consider the safety and the security. Some of these tools that exist right now that are agentic tools, such as like Claude that came out recently, and people are just allowing those to have access to their email and their credit card. And you're hearing all these interesting stories about what it's deciding to do. I actually heard a story the other day along the lines of coaching where they tasked a Claude agent to go out and perform a specific task. And it decided that it didn't have the knowledge that it needed. So it signed up for a $5,000 training course with the user's credit card, which is part of the future that we're considering and working with, and things that organizations are going to have to battle with. There will be some good thought put into that in terms of where's the shutoff points? How can we ensure that they're in some type of a sandbox where they can't necessarily go out and cause damage? But I also know that the way organizations work and people work, nothing's perfect. So there's going to be some pain probably and some interesting situations that we'll see along the way. I definitely don't think we're at a state right now where you can just push a button and hope for the best. You've really got to refine it and make sure you're pointing the tool in the right direction.
There's a couple of points there. One is there's research out there called the jagged edge of AI, and that helps clarify where AI is good and it's competent at doing something and where it's not. So that research is quite helpful if people need that. And then to your point about personally identifiable data, I wouldn't put anything that's personally identifiable into an AI tool. And I read recently that there was a journalist who'd put all of their banking details, and I was thinking, my gosh, that is such a risk. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. So I think we really, in fact, I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine yesterday, and we were comparing this era of AI with when the internet first came about. And what we were talking about there was when the internet first came out, or when it became mass consumer, really, for e-commerce and all these kind of things, we were worried about our credit cards, our personal detail. The privacy and use of that data was important. I think what's very different with this era that we're going through, the tech shift, is the debates that we're having now around AI are ethical. So yes, we've got concerns about privacy and data and guardrails, but it's the ethical dilemma of how it's changing us as people or how it's changing society. So there's a much bigger kind of conversation going on, and we need to grapple with that side of this evolution, because it's growing fast and it's going to get into all aspects of our life and work.
Opinions on technology has changed over time. When I was younger, we were a little bit more cautious. Even a lot of my friends, let's use social media as an example. A lot of the friends that are in my age range don't use social media. They don't go on it. They just have a lack of interest. And maybe that's just because they weren't exposed to it as much early on. But I think there's also that privacy for some of them. Some of them just don't really see the value in necessarily putting their information out there. Now people are becoming more comfortable with social media, putting their own personal business online, putting the details out there. And I think AI, just interacting with tools like ChatGPT or Gemini, they start becoming so friendly. They start understanding you and they start really capturing how you think. And so I think the evolution of that is people start trusting probably a little bit too much and then oversharing a little bit too much.
I like your distinction there between not, some people call their AI a name. I wouldn't do that because I don't want to blur the lines between a human and the tool or the infrastructure that is data. It's machines, it's technology. It's never going to resonate with a lived, embodied experience of another human. So, yeah, I think it's as much as I can influence that in the role that I have in the coaching space. That's what we're aiming to do this year, is to help people differentiate between the tool and what they do as a human.
Absolutely. More than half the workforce is scared that AI will replace them. How does someone go from fearing this change to actually being the person that's in charge of it?
I think getting involved, I don't think standing on the sidelines is going to help you. I think you do need to, if you haven't started to use AI, I would encourage you to do it. Just play with it. But when you think about your job role, as I mentioned earlier on, there are things that AI is good at, things like solving problems faster, repetitive tasks that could be automated, or looking at vast amounts of data and looking for patterns and uncovering things that we can do. It's great at all of those things. So what of your job could you delegate to AI because it's in the spaces where it's technically competent at doing those things? And what should you leave as yours? And how do you elevate yourself? How do you augment the work that you're doing by having or delegating the stuff you don't want to do, the repetitive stuff, to AI to free you up to do more of the things that you're great at, that is uniquely human and actually hopefully gives you more job satisfaction. So it's redesigning your job based on the value that you bring to that task or that activity. And actually in the coaching space, what we talk about is AI is really good at tasks, but the humans are really good at transformation. So if you think about the difference between a manager and a leader, managers are doing things that there is already a playbook for. You're managing a process, you're managing a thing. But leaders need to be able to operate in a space where it's ambiguous, where you don't have a playbook. And so it's a similar thing here. AI can have the playbook stuff, but the humans need to do the difficult, ambiguous, figuring out, navigating complexity, etc. That's the space for humans.
Yeah, it's just embracing that it's a tool that should be used in order to help support them in the function that they're in, but knowing that they're still the one that's the captain of the ship. They still have to be the one that's making those ultimate decisions. It makes mistakes. So if you're just allowing it to write, capture, and send that email before you had a chance to review it, then you're putting yourself at significant risk. Yeah, I would say just have that mentality that you're using it as an assistant or as a tool. That would be my suggestion.
I hear people talking about thinking about AI as an intern. And you would check and validate stuff that is going on within your team if you had that. So, think of AI like that.
I've said before, and I don't think I made this up, but I think of it as a drunk intern, slightly drunk, right? So sometimes it's got a little buzz and does some weird stuff, but you've got to try to keep it back on track.
Actually, the other thing that people maybe don't appreciate is its memory. It's limited in terms of the memory within a context window. So if you're using your AI and you're always typing into the same context window, it's going to hallucinate or get things wrong because it can't hold all of that memory. That's why it's good to always start a new chat whenever you are interacting with it on something.
Absolutely. AI can write a perfect email in seconds. So why are basic human skills like presence and curiosity more valuable now than ever?
I think as I mentioned earlier on, a phrase I use is, I think AI is more than a tech shift. It's about reconnecting with what it means to be human. So the more that we have AI taking on the repetitive tasks and things that really humans aren't best equipped to do, we've done it for years because there's been nothing else there to do it. But now we've got the opportunity to focus on what really makes us human. So what are those differentiators? And it's things like trust building. We talked about trust earlier on. Trust, ethics, presence, your emotional attunement. And you've got what it feels like to be a human that's lived a lived experience, an embodied experience. And that's how you relate to other people within your workplace, whether that's customers, employees, etc. And I think with the AI part of how you should be thinking about your role is having AI literacy, as we've talked about before, and then that safe use. So how do you ensure that you are using your critical thinking, your judgment, your moral discernment even? And then when you're thinking about your workflow, how do you redesign your work to make the best use of AI so it does allow you to be more wholly human?
Do you have any, just from like the coaching side, any practical tips that you give folks to say these are things tactically that you should be doing to improve your alignment with AI in terms of being more humans? These are the basic steps. Do you coach on anything like that?
I support the coaching profession. So the coaching profession is it's been a human crafted experience based on wisdom. It's based on resonance. And so actually coaches and the coaching profession is worried about how AI is going to change coaching, because it's an inherently human experience and practice. And in that space, we talk about, as I've described here, is what can you delegate to AI that allows you more time with your clients to focus on that deeply human experience of a coaching session. So it'll be things like the sales and marketing activity that goes around running your coaching practice. You talked about emails and things like that. So all the administrative stuff that actually takes you away from the core practice of coaching, how might you use AI to do that? And there are lots of tools and platforms in our space that can help coaches with that if they choose to do that. But it's about being clear about where you invite AI into that and how does that differentiate you. So what do you want to be famous for as a coach or in your profession? What do you want to be known for? What's your purpose, and how can using AI help you get there more effectively?
Those are great tips. I appreciate that, Susan. Mm-hmm. You've said that women are increasingly the ones shaping these systems. So what does it take to go from just keeping things running to actually being in control of the systems?
Yeah, I think this is probably, it's that kind of the glass ceiling thing. Women are doing a lot within this space. So you've got Lisa Su, who's controlling how chips are driving AI, Ursula von der Leyen, and Christine Lagarde, who are steering all of the European crises and money, etc., throughout there. So there's a lot of women in influential positions. But still, if you look around the number of leaders that there are in governments, organizations, very few of the women have gotten to the top of that. And I think that's a disservice to humanity, because I think we need diversity, inclusion at all levels of our organization, and that as women's influence grows deeper and more global, then I think we should be challenging who leads governments, who leads organizations, and have more women be able to take their fair share of that responsibility and power, if you like, especially because the future will require more diversity. The more that AI is taking repetitive tasks, etc., the more we need diversity within our human population so that we're coming up with better breakthroughs, better innovation, and that comes from diverse voices being present and part of it. So yeah, the next decade is really going to reveal whether or not leaders are allowing or being truly shared in terms of the power sharing.
I'd love to just see a shift in mentality where people realize it's time to wake up and change that up a bit. So maybe AI will help us out with that to some degree.
Well, I think the disruption that AI offers as an opportunity, I talked earlier on about the fact that I think the whole kind of central operating model, tech stack, that hierarchical way that our organizations have been built over time, I think that goes away. And the more that things become decentralized, the more that work can happen anywhere. The fact that money itself will probably change. So the way that we think about value exchanges. So because of all of that, I think there's opportunities for more women to take their part, to innovate, to find their place. and actually also for people of all countries. DEIB, I think it's important that we have as many different voices involved in power and how we want to embrace AI as humanity for the betterment of the planet.
Yeah, there's going to be a huge disruption. And there already seems to be large enterprise organizations and the solopreneurs and the smaller companies that are coming out and building these new cool tools that can just do things significantly different and don't have to deal with all the red tape that a lot of these organizations do. So I'm excited to see that. I, as somebody who has a small business myself, I think, what does that competitive landscape look like in the future? Again, I think about translating tools. So now you can, maybe that was a barrier before, right? Where somebody didn't have the ability to speak in your same language, you couldn't understand where they're coming from. But now you can tap into, let's say, an Albert Einstein in a different country that's speaking in a different language that you can now interact with. And they have this ability to do things that they never would before. And you get to work alongside of them. That's going to shape the future significantly.
And connect and collaborate, as you've mentioned, across the world. Finding your tribe that's going to be able to help your idea come to life, whatever that thing is, but also that technology is already out there that reduces the barriers to entry. So if you think about the self-driving cars that we all know about, now there are self-driving businesses. There are businesses out there that are creating these AI platforms that enable you as a solo entrepreneur to be able to get your business up and running really quickly and compete. And maybe compete with the enterprises, or even maybe steal the market from the enterprises if they're not nimble enough. Then there's that risk.
Yep. Susan, final question. When you look into the crystal ball of the future, where do you see the world of work going over the next 3, 5, 10 years?
I think 10's a long way out, but it's definitely going to be in that autonomous space. So if you think about the self-driving cars, the self-driving businesses that I've talked about, our organizations or work is going to be more about that, and it will be in flow. So it's how do we think about the future where work organizations is always on, so it's constant 24/7. Some of that will be administered by humans, some of the work will get done by humans, but a lot of the workforces that we will have in the future will have virtual agents as well as human people, so machines and humans in the org chart. And so our partnership with them, and it's already happening, like I mentioned earlier on, Salesforce already has a huge amount of their activity that is being delivered by agentic solutions. So in short, I think it is decentralized. It's the fact that the access is going to be open to a lot more people. So I think there's this democratization of commerce across boundaries, across governments, etc. And then the opportunity to really think about it self-driving. Yeah, humans are going to have to figure out where is their role. So what is it that we need to do to navigate the business transactions, etc.? Where do we need the human in the loop? I think that's what we need to think about for future businesses.
What's your prediction for people in the future?
The World Economic Forum in 2025, so their report last year, talked about by 2030, we're actually going to have net new jobs. So yes, there is a transformation of our workforce and the type of jobs that are out there, but it's going to actually add new roles, not take them away and not be replaced. So therefore, if we've got an increase in future work, it'll be different types of work. And in that report, it talks about the fact that we'll need more people that understand the ethics around AI, the guardrails around AI, the moral discernments, all the things that we mentioned are uniquely human in this conversation. That's the space where we'll get more jobs. The jobs that will be redesigned they will be redesigned as a consequence of AI taking tasks away from them, so less humans doing those things. Customer services, where I've come from, there's a lot of disruption in that space because of AI. But there are more opportunities, I think, for where do we have the human in the loop? So ethics, for instance, the escalation points. What do those jobs look like?
Yeah, I agree. People are going to have to adapt to that.
Because the type of work that we'll do in the future will be better suited to humans, I hope people will find it more rewarding because you're using more of what makes you uniquely human. Sitting, typing stuff into Excel, you can do it, but it's not really fulfilling unless you, so in the example of an accountant there, rather than being focused on of the administration of all of the payroll or the accounts, etc., is actually helping that business decide what's the best action to take next, or where their strategy might go, or where value could be more, where we could get more value out of the kind of the strategic landscape of your business. There are all sorts of different ways you can use your expertise. Yeah.
There's people that say in sales and marketing, communication and training and coaching because they like to do that. There's something maybe innate within them that's their comfort zone. And I know a number of accountants that just love sitting in front of a computer in Excel, but if you told them that they needed to come up with dramatic ideas about the future and how to shape that within the organization and how that's just not how they're programmed. It's just a completely different mindset shift. And I don't think it's going to align to everybody.
About, as an individual, finding your zone of genius. So what is it that you care passionately about? What difference do you want to make in the world? How do you want to spend your time? And then finding roles that align to that, or organizations that align to that. Because also there are going to be new organizations that we do. I mean, that's a constant anyway, but if you think about all of the green energy and the climate change, and that's spawned a whole group of organizations that we probably couldn't have imagined 20 years ago or something like that. But we've also had the gig economy and platforms, and all of that has changed the way that you could consider work. A value exchange for you as a person may not mean 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It might be a portfolio career. It might be that you try something for a few years and then you move to do something different in a couple of years' time. So I think we do have to think about work in a different way and how we want to earn, what value means to us, because it may not be money. In the future, it'll be something else. Shameless plug, but the world needs more coaches. It's always a good thing to help humanity navigate all of these complexities with the skills of being a coach. ICF is always welcoming new members.
Awesome. For everyone who wants to follow your work and stay ahead of what's coming, where can people find out about you and tell us a bit more about humane.org and the ICF?
Yes, ICF is where I work as a director of AI, as you mentioned up at the top. Our website is coachingfederation.org, and that's where you'll find out everything that is about the professional world of coaching and how AI is becoming part of our conversations in that space. Humane.org is my own project where I'm advocating for female leadership, but also the ethical and responsible use of AI to benefit the planet. So life-centered design and everything around helping us make good decisions around the planet. And then LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn and I post a lot of stuff on there. So those are the ways that people can stay in touch if they're interested. Yeah, thank you once again, Jeff, for the opportunity to be here. It's been an interesting conversation. A few things I'm like, I'm not really sure what it's going to be like, but I'm interested. We're on the journey together, aren't we?
Yeah. Great. Susan, thanks again for being here and helping our audience stay unlocked.
Thank you so much.